live from the Fatheads Eyewear Studio. This is the third episode of Unverified. We're so excited to have you guys here live on YouTube, as we are every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We got a super packed show for you today because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. We're going to be talking about the Indy 500 entry list. That's a continuing and developing story. We're going to be talking about Fox Sports and the TV rating that came out today, which, thank God, was not bad. We're very happy to report that. And, hey, there was actually an IndyCar race this weekend. The Grand Prix of St. Petersburg, we're going to be breaking it down because I think there's a lot of interesting storylines coming out of there. And, of course, we got producer Kyle in the house. He'll be your voice. You'll be, as you guys chat, hopefully we'll be able to hear some of your contributions today. And, of course, sitting alongside of me is my co-host, Tony Donohue of the Tony D podcast. Tony, you were actually in St. Pete this weekend. So what were the vibes like down there in sunny Tampa?
It wasn't as sunny as you would think. It was a little bit overcast, so I didn't get the proper tan that I usually get, which carries me through the month of May. But it was a lot of fun down there. Thought the crowd was awesome at the racetrack. And it's always good to get the season started. It's even better to get it started on the streets of beautiful St. Petersburg, Florida.
You mentioned something interesting to me that I think is really important to mention. First of all, every report out of there sounded like the crowd was up all 3 days, which is good to hear. But specifically about that crowd, I think it's an interesting trend that we've noticed with IndyCar fans at the recent races. Yeah,
some of the things that we've talked about is, even people in St. Petersburg, I've been in an Uber and the guy's like, "Oh, are you here for the Grand Prix?" "Yeah, I am." "Oh, is that NASCAR? Is that Formula One?" "No, it's IndyCar." So what I've really noticed, especially at St. Petersburg, Florida, which is a diverse crowd, so many more IndyCar shirts and hats and jerseys. They had, I know Kyle loved them. He's going to have to get himself one. I know he got him a shirt, but a lot of the Chili's jerseys were out there. But there was a lot of gear that was IndyCar specific. I was told that merchandise sales through Sunday at about 11 o'clock were higher than they've ever seen at St. Petersburg, Florida for that race. So that's always a good sign where you're getting fans to come out and check out the race, but also keeping them around. They're buying the merchandise and hope that continues into other races here over the next couple of weeks as we build up to the Indianapolis 500.
And that's been the trend over the last couple of races. I remember back at Milwaukee, we talked to Bud Denker, and I kind of get to tell Bud Denker and kind of be like, "Hey, dude, all of the Milwaukee Mile specific merchandise is sold out," which surprised him and pleased him. But the thing that Bud said to us at Milwaukee that I thought was really interesting was that he noticed that the crowd at Milwaukee was true IndyCar fans. They were all wearing the shirts. And Nashville was very much the same thing. The Big Machine Music City Grand Prix, tons of true IndyCar support. So really the last three races have really shown, the IndyCar fans have really shown up and shown out in person, which I think is a great sign for the series to kind of start it off on a positive note. We've talked about a few dude bro-ish things already. Let's get into dude bro sources because as happens at race weekends, people start talking for the first time in 6 months. We've all kind of been together, or at least we've been talking in the same circles once again. And Tony, you've heard a few interesting things that I'd like to add a little bit to once you kind of let us know what they are.
Yeah, I think one is something that most of us have probably heard the rumors of and would make a lot of sense. Another one is going to be something that maybe you haven't heard. The first is that Ray Hall, which has gone back and forth. We've heard yes, we've heard no. We know how much these things change. All signs, I would say, are pointing to Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan Racing having a fourth entry at this year's Indianapolis 500 with two-time Indianapolis 500 winner Takuma Sato in the cockpit, which is the news that I'm sure a lot of people have heard the rumors. It's gone back and forth on whether or not Ray Hall was indeed going to run that fourth car. Obviously coming in with Graham, Louis Foster, and Devlin DeFrancesco. You now bring in Takuma Sato, who we know qualified that car well, is always will always keep his foot into it, and is always somebody that you want to keep your eye on at the Indianapolis 500.
And it makes a lot of sense. It makes a ton of sense. Takuma won the Indy 500 for them in 2020. He has been fast in that car every time he's been in it. He was the fastest qualifier last year. And for a team, now, I think some of the comments that Graham made last year showed a little bit of trouble in paradise with that team when Takuma returned to it. But I think on the whole, Takuma Sato makes every team that he joins, particularly at the Indianapolis 500, stronger. So it just makes too much sense for Ray Hall. Now, to the point that we talked about yesterday, or on the last show, the concern would be with Rahal is if you are in that kind of bump slot and you are entering the 34th car, you might be bumping yourself. And that's a situation that they found themselves in 2023, and you don't want to find yourself in again.
Yeah, and obviously, as you just mentioned, the qualifying woes that team has had. And when we knew that we were at 33, it was a lot of teams and a lot of drivers in the paddock were, okay, do we take that risk of bumping out maybe a full-time driver and what that scenario would look like? As somebody who enjoys Takuma Sato, I don't want him to just go away. We don't know, and then we never see him again type of the thing. Like, if he is going to run the Indianapolis 500, I'm glad, I'm not saying it's this year, but I think I would like to know when it's going to be his last because he deserves a proper send-off. Obviously, he's been involved in 3 thrilling finishes, especially 2012. Obviously, the race that he won in 17 was incredible. Then 2020 had some drama at the end there, too, even though the fans weren't there. So to my point of having a proper send-off, kind of almost...
he still needs to celebrate the 2020 race.
I should have let him burn down Georgetown Road. But the other piece of news that we have learned and have connected some of the dots is that Katherine Legge, with the ELF sponsorship, which did so well last year with the female audience inside of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, with their activation. They won awards on their activation last year with Katherine being in that car. And you and I have talked about this. I've said it on my podcast. I've said it on this show. With ELF and the relationship with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, I just don't see how you can go into the month of May without having a female driver, without having Katherine Legge as your female driver on that entry list. So it's been multiple teams rumored of, can they, there's a lot that goes into it. You've got to have the crew. You've got to have the chassis. You've got to have the engine. You've got to have the driver. It's got to make sense. You've got to have the check. And the latest that I have heard, which I am pretty confident in saying, is maybe at the 15 to 10-yard line, trying to push it across the goal line. It would be Katherine Legge running with Brian Herta Autosport, which is a name in IndyCar that, yes, we've heard Brian's name, obviously with Andretti Global, but we haven't seen him field a car in quite some time. So it would be Katherine Legge with Brian Herta Autosport for the 35th entry for this year's Indianapolis 500.
So I've got a few things to contribute here. From a historical standpoint, the last time Brian Herta Autosport, should this happen, fielded its own entry was 2015. That would be Gabby Chavez. There was a couple of other opportunities. I remember at one point, I think there was another potential entry around 2016. Obviously, they had one with Alexander Rossi, co-entrant with Andretti, which they won the race. But this, should it happen, would be the first time it's happened in over 10 years. So I'm gonna turn the U to a V real quick. I am gonna be verified here for a second.
Now it only took what, a couple shows?
Took 3 episodes.
Took 3 shows.
Now listen,
okay.
you suggested a fact checker a couple episodes ago, so I get one
for
verified.
IndyCar, not for us.
So full disclosure, I have a working relationship with Brian Herta through Hyundai, and some activations that we've worked on in the past, and some that we will work on in the future. So knowing that, I was on a call with them today talking about some other projects that we're working on, and I knew that this was a rumor going around, and so I turned the hat around, and the hat had a J on it at that point. And I said, look, now I'm doing some journalism here. You don't have to, we are now on the record. Have you heard about this?
But you don't have a journalism degree.
Well, that's not my problem. I asked the question, and the answer was no comment. So it's not a no from them, but officially from Brian Herta Autosport right now, it is a no comment. Now, that being said, I think that it would be awesome if this comes together. I think that, to your point, Katherine should be in the field, or at least have an opportunity to qualify. Of course, that's the whole point of having extra entries, is that we want to have a race to get in the race. That is what makes Indy. They are a team that has, on short notice, remember 2011, they won the race with Dan Weldon. Now, I'm not saying Katherine Legge is the equivalent of Dan Weldon, but this team is absolutely capable of putting something like this together. And the other thing I think that's really important about this, that if it does come together, it says something about the Indianapolis 500 itself and helps, because what is the thing I complained about on the last episode? There's not enough small teams to be able to fill out that entry list. Well, here you go. Brian Hurd Autosport, if they are trying to make this happen, and I personally believe that they are, despite the fact that they closed their lips the minute I asked them about it, I believe that they're trying to do this, and I think it would be an amazing story to have a small team, a former winning team, but one that is very much an underdog trying to get in the field. That is what makes Indy. Capable team, though. I mean, they have so many of their former IndyCar people working for their Hyundai program. I'm sure there are some other crew members that could come from around the sport. If this comes together, it will be a proper program for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's a great way to display, how great Brian Hurd Autosport is in other series that you know very well, that you've seen, and elevate maybe their brand as well, knowing that Katherine and that sponsor is going to bring a lot of eyeballs, not only just at the Indianapolis 500, but also throughout the advertisements that they do and some of the campaigns as well. So I think it'd be an exciting opportunity for both Brian Hurd Autosport and Katherine Legge. I don't know if there's going to be any kind of partnership, maybe with Andretti. That could possibly make some sense. Obviously, Brian is an employee there and is on the stand for Kyle Kirkwood. And with that being said, it just shows that maybe even down the road, if there's a smaller team out there, like, we can take that jump forward. Why can't we be? And everybody loves an underdog story, especially at the Indianapolis 500. And this possibly could be. We saw Katherine and what she did qualifying last year, keeping her foot into it and putting that thing in the show cleanly with Dale Coyne Racing. So I'm excited for it. It brings back bumping, it looks like, with what we've been talking about with now having 35 cars, which is something that a week ago when we sat here, we're like, how do we change qualifying weekend? How do we move scheduling around if we don't have a back row shootout? What's that going to look like? And now it looks like we will for sure at least have one bump, more than likely to have two bumps, which brings that drama and elevates that Indianapolis 500 qualifying weekend.
So I think a lot of us, about a month and a half ago had the count at 36. Mm-hmm. There's one entry that I know you've been on top of that has been kind of developing in the background. Yep. The mystery fourth Ganassi entry, potentially having Tom Brady, Jimmy Johnson, a few others associated with that. What is the status update on that right now, Tony? Yeah,
so I talked with Chip after the win on Sunday, which probably I thought was a really good time because he was probably in a good mood, obviously, and we saw him dancing in the victory circle. And he said they had a conversation, and it just never really came any more than that. And I'm assuming that when I was given that information, that conversation had taken place. And as I preferenced on the Tony D podcast, it was, this is being discussed, this is talked about, this is linked. It was never, this is happening, it's official, let's see. We've learned some other things, maybe behind the scenes, that I'm not comfortable kind of bringing up, as I told you off the record. But would be a cool effort if that were to come to fruition. It doesn't look like it's going to, but you never know. Maybe something like that comes in 2026. Now, am I saying that we won't see Tom Brady or a presence at the Indianapolis 500? I wouldn't be shocked if he was there and he kind of got rolled up his sleeves and said, "I want to be." I mean, look at how excited A-Rod was, right? When he got, he told Eric Smith of IndyCar.com, like, I want to own a team. I want to be a part of this. This was thrilling. And I was like, yeah, come on over. Have you ever met George Steinbrenner? Oh, yeah, you have, haven't you? Talk to him. He knows exactly what it's like to be a part of IndyCar and how thrilling and exciting it is. So I still think we could still see a Tom Brady presence at the Indianapolis 500.
You know what? Let's really speculate here.
Well, we got to preference it so the Reddit warriors know.
So let's say Katherine's ride isn't quite across the finish line yet.
Okay.
Who partnered with Steinbrenner back in the day? It was Herta.
Yeah.
So they have a great relationship. So let's say Steinbrenner, Herta, and A-Rod running Katherine at the 5. Why not?
That'd be wild.
Wouldn't that be cool? I don't know. Hey, I'll throw it out there in the universe, and let's just see what happens. All right. A-Rod, call George, call Brian. Let's get this going.
Yeah, that's what it is to push it across the finish line. Let's bring in Kyle. What's going on? What's with the chat? And welcome.
Let's get the chat going. We got about a minute here until we move on. Minute and a half. We'll get the chat in. So first off, Austin Skirvin just wanted me to tell you guys nice purple mic covers.
Yeah,
this time.
The Amazon guy didn't come.
Amazon didn't show up early enough. We should have. I don't know what we're going to decide yet. I bought two different colors. There was a black one and like an unverified blue. I guess we'll surprise you next episode. But yeah, these are actually the original David Land mic cover. So you can notice they're a little bit sun faded.
At least you can hear us.
So there are two questions I really liked. The first one was from Stimmy Snurdly, asking, was the Unical 76 a one-off sponsorship for Connor, or was that a longer-term deal? So what do you guys know about that?
Yeah, so what I found out, because also Kyle Collette in Indy Next, who finished third, and shout out to Dennis Hogger for his first win, and Lockie Hughes for finishing his first Indy Next race second. Andretti Indy Next really showed out in that race. I was told that this was a last-minute deal that came through from a distributor or somebody who uses Unical 76. So I think it's a local gas station owned by somebody. I could be wrong on that, but I was told that it was through somebody else that used Unical 76 as probably the fuel at their said gas station. So I don't know if we will see it again. And it was very last minute. It was very 11th hour.
It was, the weird part about that was like Juncos was very top secret about it. They didn't talk. I don't think they ever like they I think they told somebody, I think it might have been Bob Proctor's, that they would talk about it later, and then they never talked about it later. So I don't, and the other thing is I don't know what the status would be with doing like a Unical sponsorship with Shell as the fuel supplier.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Like I said,
I think you can.
Bob Pockrass, I think, covered that.
Yeah.
And he said the only sponsor you can't clash with in IndyCar is NTT and Firestone. So obviously you can't have a freaking Goodyear car.
Right.
And NTT is on half the cars anyways. So like,
it obviously came together last minute because we didn't really know that it was even happening until about a half hour before that Friday practice, because we were walking through and I was like, why is there like orange on Connor's car? And my initial thought, kind of seeing it from a distance, was like they had just put orange tape around maybe the back to differentiate him for the spotters from Stingray Rob's car, because those cars are very similar. Then I walked up and I was like, and you know what everybody who's watched NASCAR in the 90s knows exactly what that logo is. And I just thought, well, that had to be last minute, because I could think of a cool livery where like it's blue and orange and you really deck it out. It's, some of those deals are crazy. Like Ed Carpenter Racing had Cutwater, which is an alcoholic beverage, on there. And I was told that was an exchange of a couple cases of that for the crew guys to enjoy after the race. So, those things happen, last minute deals, but also because Kyle Collette had 76, changed his number, but he didn't have the actual logo as his number on the car like Connor Daly did.
But he did on the Spotter's Guide and on Timing and Scoring. So that was what was weird. Like when I was watching, Collette did.
Oh.
Yeah.
On the car, it said 76 and it was white. It was not the orange sticker.
It was that was a mystery that we still don't have the answers to. I think that's the easiest answer there.
Yeah, no. I guess we'll find out more,
or maybe we won't.
It's good to see it. Good to see it on Connor's car. Something that we've talked about, on this show and has been discussed. Needs money, needs some sponsorship money after the polka dot situation didn't get across the finish line, for lack of a better term. So good to see them having some sort of sponsorship on that Juncos car, which is over the last couple of years been few and far between.
All right.
What else is popping in the chat?
So someone, Josh Day, brought up that there were some online rumors about Will Power having to get his neck checked out after the race, and people hadn't really heard from him. Have we heard anything about that?
Yeah, so I was told that he went to a hospital in St. Petersburg, Florida, I believe, to be checked out from his neck. But the latest that I heard, that he had returned to the racetrack and was released. So I haven't heard of any other specific injuries to that. And I think that'll probably, if anything comes out in due time. I want to say this real quick. I was in Will Power's box after qualifying when he didn't make. I'm not sure if I told you this. And Will was very heated, and Liz was there to calm him down, which was
and Liz is his wife.
Which was great to see. And I looked at Eric and I said, Will told David Land and I this in a elevator. Just give him a minute and he'll be fine. And he came over and answered every one of my questions, thanked me, was super cool. So I know sometimes it can be a roller coaster with Will Power, but I've certainly appreciated kind of talking to him as of late because we know 2023 wasn't the best season for him and a resurgence last year. So that was very interesting. There was a photographer in the pit box that kind of had gotten in the way, and look, the whole St. Pete, you can buy as a fan, you can buy a paddock pass to walk through the pits, and there's not a lot of room. And I'm telling you, something that has to be widened because somebody's going to roll an ankle. Joseph jumped off. Joseph and Eric Smith and I were walking, and some dude kind of cut Joseph off for an autograph, and Joseph stepped on him. Like, could you imagine if this dude rolled hurt his ankle? So I'll volunteer. Because I have the biggest of broad shoulders, right? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so it was very jam-packed, which is a good sign that there was a lot of fans down there, but there was times it was hard to get through. And then you've got people kind of standing there spinning around and taking videos for their TikToks, but that's another story for another time. Chip didn't like that, which shout out to Chip Ganassi.
Let's get into talking about Fox. The chat is very amped up about the TV rating.
Okay. Amped up in what way?
Good
Positive,
or bad?
Negative?
Positive.
Okay.
Positive on the TV rating, positive about Kickstart My Heart.
So you and I had discussed what's a good rating. Mm-hmm. What does it look like? And I think you and I were in the middle of 1.2 million to 1.5 million was, okay, that's on the right direction. I believe it's a 45% jump.
Oh, so it's a huge So I think we need to establish first that, and we heard this from people in the industry, right?
Yeah.
This was not just us. I mean, I think I landed on that number, but a lot of other people landed on the number 2.
Yeah.
Which was, I think everyone was going to be pleased with 1.5 million people.
Yep.
They're just below that, but the positive is this is the biggest IndyCar TV rating since 2011 St. Pete. Ironically enough, it was a St. Pete rating. And to your point, it's up 45% from last year. So if we think about this and we go, okay, well, the team owners were hoping year over year it was going to be a 20 to 25% increase. Well, we are well above that right now. On the surface level, this is all super positive. Now, there's some nuance to that, and we can get into that, and I'm definitely going to get into that. But I think we should focus first on saying, surface level, this is awesome for IndyCar. Yeah?
Yeah, and look, the promotion, the Super Bowl lead-in, the envelopes that people got in the mail, Fox hit a home run. It's what we've been discussing in watching this race. And I've said this too multiple times. I'm kind of more worried about the thermal, the Barber rating, what that looks like, and that'll really be a factor. That'll be the most telling is what those look like, because on the Fox advertisements that they have been doing, which Scott Dixon made a funny joke say that they think that there's only 3 drivers in the sport. That was funny after practice or after qualifying on Saturday. It's positive. There was some hiccups, I think, in the broadcast itself. I was told that the graphics package that they used on Saturday for qualifying was the backup graphics package, so they had some problems with that. But look, we're not doom and glooming it right now. It's okay that there's momentum that's there. Let's build off of that leading up to the Indianapolis 500 over the next couple of weeks. I know you got 18 more days till the next race, which just call it 3 weeks, if you will. And there was a lot that I liked about it. I know you like Kickstart My Heart. We'll get to that in a minute. I thought Jack Harvey did a really good job on pit road. It was great to see Jamie Little back. Obviously, Kevin Lee will always do a good job. And I think Buxton is going to be somebody you'll have to get used to. I thought he had a good weekend. I think it takes time. You have to build chemistry. You can't prepare for what is happening. You can prepare all you want, but boom, Nolan Siegel and Will Power wreck in turn 1 or turn 3. How do you handle that? You're reacting to what you see. So that takes rhythm. That takes building chemistry with Townsend and James Hinchcliffe. And I thought overall when I rewatch it today, it was pretty good. There's room for improvement, and I don't think Fox execs and Will Buxton wants anybody to sit here and say, "Oh, it was perfect, it was great, it's never going to get better." No, everybody needs room for improvement, and I think that will continue. And there'll be a chemistry in the booth, which I think they're already starting. We saw that, and there was a few hiccups, but overall, I thought it was a pretty good effort by Fox this weekend.
I have a bit of a point of contention with you. I mean, I don't want to downplay this too much, but you said home run. I would say it was probably a double. I don't think it's a home run. Did I say home run? You said home run. You said it was a home run. I would say it was a double.
I said it was a home run?
Yeah.
I don't think the word home runs came out of my mouth.
Well, all right, roll the tape.
We'll have to roll the tape.
Roll the tape. But, okay, well, so.
Kills Donk will let us know.
That's okay. Yeah, we know. Yes, we love Steve. But I don't think it was quite a home run. I think, so here's my issue with the TV rating. And it's, so surface level, awesome. 45% increase, biggest rating since 2011. Awesome. You can promote that. You can sell it to sponsors. Great start. Don't want to diminish that whatsoever. There's some below-the-surface stuff that I do want to kind of address because I think that you had the absolute perfect situation that Fox created for you. You had Super Bowl ads. You had amazing promotion. I mean, top-level, A-plus promotion going into this race, as you mentioned. You had a lead-in to NASCAR, which produced the biggest TV rating of last year. NASCAR's TV rating was enormous. 4.1 million people tuned in. Now, IndyCar did peak at 1.8 million towards the end of the race. That the average was 1.4 million. But I don't want to say concerns me, but I think there are a few factors that we need to think about, and it's the 2022 rating from St. Pete, which is, I think, the third highest rating that we've ever seen, at least post-Indy 500, post-2011. And that was 1.4 million. I think like the actual change is a little bit lower, but it was something like 36 to 80 million or 80,000 people lower than this TV rating. So within the ballpark, to use another baseball reference. And I kind of was looking into it, speaking to some people, kind of trying to jog my memory about St. Pete 2022. And you did not have the perfect situation there. You had the lead-in rating, I don't even remember what it was, but I know the post-programming was the Paralympics, which got about the same TV rating, around 1.4 million. So there wasn't a massive lead-out at St. Pete in 2022. You didn't have that massive promotional push. I mean, 2022 and NBC, they were very much simmering down in terms of promoting IndyCar. So, in a non-perfect situation, you had IndyCar getting a really good TV rating, and here in a perfect situation, they got a good TV rating, but I don't think they absolutely knocked it out of the park grand slam. The one thing that I would suggest that helped 2022 versus this year, and something that to be constructive about it for Fox and IndyCar next year, is that the 2022 St. Pete race took place a week after the Daytona 500.
Huge point.
And I think with Fox, that's going to be a big key moving forward. And that's something that Doug Bowles has mentioned. He mentioned it on the Speed Street podcast, that he wants to kind of build out the beginning of the season. To me, I don't even, and again, I want to be constructive here because I think this is a great start, but I think there's room to improve. And here's where you improve. I think if you had a race the week after the Super Bowl, let's say we go to Phoenix to open the season instead of St. Pete, and then St. Pete's the week after Daytona. So you go start in Phoenix the week after the Super Bowl, then you have Daytona 500, and then lead into that into St. Pete. I think you would have a really, really strong TV rating there because you would have Super Bowl bump for the first race, and they'd be like, who's Pato, who's Pelot, all this stuff. Then you have Daytona 500, and again, you have another bump because you can heavily promote it there. That is where I think IndyCar is in a little bit of a bind with the TV numbers. And I know this is something you want to talk about, is that there's this 3-week break, and then we go to Thermal, which was one of the least popular races of last year. It's going to be a tough sell. I mean, they're using Al Unser Sr., Mario Andretti, and Rick Mears to sell Thermal. And that's how you know they're kind of desperate to sell it. Thermal is going to be very difficult. Explain some of the factors why it's going to be difficult for IndyCar and Fox.
Well, I think the sport, it's momentum, right? And it's knowing, hey, NASCAR is racing every weekend. So the 4 million people that watch NASCAR on Sunday know that they can tune in next Sunday for yet another race. And I know in a perfect world, maybe some people would want 25, 26 IndyCar races. That isn't where we are right now. As a college basketball fan, when I'm watching a college basketball game on Fox or FS1, there's a scroll at the bottom, and it would say IndyCar St. Pete. Is Fox going to continue to have that? What's the promotion going to be like from Fox and from IndyCar over the next couple weeks leading into Thermal? Oh, by the way, to some fans, Thermal is a private club that they can't get into, that they don't feel welcomed at. Now, whether that's true or not, and in last year's race, it's a cool track. It really is. You and I were out there last year, but the racing, even though it was an all-star race or $1 million challenge or whatever they wanted to say it was or wasn't, the strategy was kind of weird and people were kind of holding up and saving tires. My thing with Thermal Club is you're going to have the NCAA tournament going on, right? And I know you can't sit around and say, oh, well, we can't just hold off and not go up against the NCAA tournament or not go against the Masters in early April. But that is a huge, massive event, the NCAA tournament. And you're going to a racetrack where the racing may not be all that great, which I think we could say about St. Pete. For the average casual viewer turning into St. Pete, they were going, oh, well, we haven't seen a pass for the lead. We are kind of confused on what the tire strategy is going on because we've got greens and primaries and Pato's calling it reds and we're hearing red. It's really confusing. And I think, we could talk about what Firestone did. And I mean, I had one driver tell me they dropped off after one lap. Like, so I think in the race they were lasting 12 to 14.
Yeah, there was as the track progressed, it got a little bit better.
And I was talking to Devlin. I was talking to Devlin on Sunday morning, and I said, or Saturday, and I said, don't you just start on those? And there's more than likely going to be a full course caution on lap one. Don't you roll the dice on that? I said, no offense, Devlin, love you, but you know all about a lap one crash here. And he goes, I do. He goes, that's probably the proper strategy. But with Thermal, how are you going to continue to build momentum for the next 18 days to get people to tune into a race that could be spread out, could be another dominating race by Alex Palou, could be a race where you don't see passes for the lead, and this like club that IndyCar fans probably don't feel welcome into, while there's a bid for the Sweet 16 on the line on a college basketball game on CBS.
You're missing another very key point.
I'm going to let you make
one
it.
of the biggest issues with NASCAR and Fox and IndyCar being on the same network, and I don't know how this or why this happened, because this happened with NBC a couple of times. It's a direct conflict with NASCAR and Homestead. And Homestead is one of the most popular races on the NASCAR schedule for hardcore fans because it's kind of a traditional 1.5 mile racetrack. So it's tough with the NASCAR conflict to say, well, what is a fan going to choose to watch? Are they going to watch cars going 3 and 4 wide and 3 and 4 lanes at Homestead, or are they going to choose Thermal, which is a race that had some bad press last year, has got to try to, first of all, dig themselves out of that hole, and then second of all, they've got to try to put on a real points race with 27 race cars out there and put on a good show. That's going to be difficult, and then you're pretty much kissing the casual people goodbye with the NCAA tournament, and you've also been off television for 3 weeks. It's an uphill battle for sure.
It is, and what do you do, right?
There's nothing you can do this year.
If Fox won that thing on Sunday and not Saturday, the NCAA tournament's still going on. But as I mentioned, I am more interested in the Thermal and Barber ratings. I think I have to double check. Apologize if I'm wrong on this. I think Barber is at the end of April, first week of May.
First week of May.
So first week of May. So, okay, maybe people are loving it because we're getting into the spirit of the month of May. You drive around Speedway and all of Indianapolis in the month of May, and May 1st, people are putting up their banners. Long Beach, I believe, doesn't conflict with the Masters, so that's good. I think Long Beach will maybe have a really. I think of the next three, Long Beach is going to have the better of the three ratings between Thermal, Long Beach, and Barber.
I think to kind of tie a bow on this, I think Fox within the first two races is going to have an excellent idea of what IndyCar can do on their network, because you just had the perfect situation for a TV rating with St. Pete, and now you're going to have pretty much the most imperfect situation for a TV rating at Thermal. So somewhere in between is going to be what to expect from Fox, I think.
If I was placing my bets on it, Thermal will be on FS1 next year.
Oof. That's rough.
Early bold prediction that I hope I am very wrong on, but we shall see.
I talked about this on my video a little bit, and I think you kind of touched on it. I did like the broadcast. I think I think we need to point this out, that I think there was some really strong stuff on the broadcast. I think the commentary was very good. Will Buxton exceeded my expectations. I think Jamie Little it was great to see her back.
Yeah.
I miss Jamie Little.
And every driver said that.
Yeah.
That I guess knew her, right? There's some drivers that probably haven't met her, but there are a lot of drivers still in that paddock that know her and know her very well. So that was good to see. Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good. James Hinchcliffe, Townsend Bell, still just kicking.
Yeah.
Kevin Lee, all good. Jack Harvey, I know there's been some debate about Jack Harvey, and obviously he was nervous. I think he admitted as much on the Hinch and Rossi podcast. But I thought his contributions were solid. I think he will grow into that role. I think he's going to be good later on down the line. I think Fox had some interesting ideas. There wasn't as much innovation as I thought there should be, and it's good to know that they did admit fault for the qualifying broadcast, because that was definitely the low point of the weekend, watching it on television. But again, I think that Fox, what I would say about Fox is they are trying to make IndyCar look glamorous. There was a lot of, I called it boat porn.
Well, it's nice to feel, we'll talk about that when the show is over. It's nice to feel liked, right? Fox has came in. I like the drone cam. I saw that flying over a bunch. I loved how on the onboard camera of the driver, they took the screen and made it, put the telemetry right there.
Straight out of F1.
Yep, and Townsend explained what it was. I mean, you got to see how far you are from the next turn.
What was missing from that graphic?
You tell me.
Hybrid.
Well,
so that was something that I pointed out in my video that was very.
There's a lot of things missing with the hybrid.
Was conspicuously missing from the broadcast until former, maybe current Honda company man James Hinchcliffe brought it up. Was that no graphics for hybrids? Very little mention, if any, of hybrids. But we'll certainly talk about it later on in the race. It still had a pretty big impact on the race.
Well, you can hop on the IndyCar app and get that if you don't need it to be updated. I got several texts and tweets that during the race the IndyCar app wasn't working and needed updated. So I thought that was very interesting.
Back to yearly tradition like no other. Unfortunately.
Back to Jack Harvey. Our boy Joe here made a good point. He said, "Look." Could you imagine, that's your first broadcast, and it's the one that's been promoted more than any other race outside of the Indianapolis 500 for the last couple of years? I think Jack will get more comfortable. I looked at it like when you're calling a pit stop, you've got 10 seconds to get a lot of information out there. And sometimes that's a clean stop, boom. But I thought, maybe they should have elaborated more. I went back to what he said, and I think they did mention how, Will they make an adjustment to the front wing? Will you do that because obviously the car's heavier? Obviously you put on a different set of tires. I think Townsend explained that, or maybe it was Hinch throughout the broadcast. Jack will get better. What I want to see more out of Jack, which there really wasn't an opportunity maybe because Will obviously didn't get interviewed. I know Louis Foster did. I think Jamie did that. And I think Nolan was interviewed by Jamie as well. What I would like to see, where I think Jack would be the best, is that emotion of a driver, regardless of who's interviewing them, isn't going to maybe be fully open. But if it's Jack Harvey interviewing him, somebody who knows the exact feeling of getting knocked out of a race or getting crashed or is frustrated, it's going to be a more personal conversation than with, and it's not a knock on any of the reporters. They just simply haven't been in the race car, and Jack knows what that driver is going through after being knocked out on lap one, even whether it's your fault or not. So I think moving forward, I think that'll be a huge key and a huge part of the success for Jack Harvey in that role. And then I also hope, and I'm sure that they will, I would love him to be, a driver analyst inside the car throughout the month of May at the Indianapolis 500. Obviously, we know he's driving for Brian Reinbold, but, maybe a little bit more inside access to, and this is something I believe ABC did years ago, but I still think it's compelling, what the driver's going through, what his heart rate's like. Hey, this guy's about to sweat off 12 pounds over the next 500 miles. Hey, this is what a cool suit is. Here's what his drink bottle is. Those type of things that I think would enhance and take you a little bit more behind the scenes of a broadcast.
All right, David, finish this up, and then we'll go to the chat.
No, I was about to say I think we should table the Fox discussion. So what does the chat have to say? I'd love to hear it.
All right, so first question was from Mason. He said, I've heard IndyCar teams say that the stretch of the season where races every weekend is hard on the teams. How can NASCAR do it for so many races? Does Okay, we're back.
All right,
Okay,
looks like we're
all right.
back. We had some technical difficulties.
Can I answer this question now? I've been sitting
So
here
we
for
apologize
10
for
minutes.
that, but yes, you've been.
So the question was, to reiterate, that why can NASCAR race every week?
Yes.
And IndyCar can. And so the big issue is money,
course.
obviously, but like to make it more subtle, and it's something that some of the IndyCar teams have already brought up, the idea of having fly-in pit crews. So NASCAR teams operate where there is a shop crew and a track crew. IndyCar teams don't operate that way. The shop crew is the track crew and vice versa. There are very few specialists who come in. To really run a longer schedule, you would need to essentially double the crew to be able to prep the cars each week, both at the racetrack and at the shop. And that's where IndyCar just, and IndyCar really never operated that way, even when they were racing for more races. That's more of a stock car thing to do. And also, the IndyCar schedule is a little bit more demanding than the NASCAR. Now, the NASCAR schedule is starting to get that way, where it's much less, focused on the Southeast. But nowadays, the IndyCar schedule, it's like you're in Laguna Seca one weekend,
spread out.
you're Gateway. Oh, yeah. Well,
It's spread out not only from the dates, it's spread out from.
all over the country. And
Well, it's like
Yeah.
here, and then down, and then way out here, and there's nothing in the middle.
yeah, well, yeah, that's true. Well, maybe we'll get Denver someday. Oh, boy. Exciting.
Definitely going to get Denver. All right, we did have a race, which is what we need to talk about. Alex Palou winning. Scott Dixon finishing second, the GOAT doing GOAT-like things. Joseph Newgarden rounded out your podium. There were some interesting runs inside of the top 10. Colton Herta had some issues. Pot of Award had an up-and-down day. But Ganassi going 1-2. Honda top 2 spots. Joseph third. McLaughlin kind of faded there. Looked like the overcut worked instead of the undercut, which in the past the undercut has worked. And we saw Alex Palou cruise to a season opening victory, and it's very similar to what Dario did in 2011, trying to go for his third championship in that 10 car. Dario kicked off that season in pursuit of his third straight championship with a victory in the 10 car. Kyle.
So I don't have a camera anymore, so I'm just going to be a voice
No, that's fine.
among
Okay.
the
voice
people.
of God.
To start this, Taurus did ask earlier, I saved this one, asked, do you think the race would have been better or worse without the lap 1 caution?
Better, because you would have had the comers and goers with the greens, at least a little bit of it. You would have had the strategy play out a little bit more. I mean, ultimately, the race was a race to get off of the green tires and onto the black tires. And once everybody was on the black tires, yes, it became a more equal race, but then there was no differentiating factor between the cars, so they couldn't pass each other. So I think, to Taurus's point, yes, you would have had a more exciting race had you not had the lap 1 pileup. And, from like a TV standpoint, I think it would have been a little bit better because you would have shown the folks some racing rather than some wrecking.
Yeah, and I didn't think that was going to be the only yellow when it happened. I thought we would at least get one more. I mean, it's like I was talking about the first. I said there's just a lot of drivers out there that don't have experience on street courses, and if they do, it's not a lot. So I was impressed at how clean the remainder of the race was. And then it was a race, as you mentioned, what's your tire strategy? What's it going to look like? Then we had some lap traffic get involved in some things, which kind of which gave us some drama that we probably weren't going to have. And in lieu of a caution, we at least had some drama with some lap cars. But Alex Palou doing Alex Palou-like things, business as usual, going for his third straight championship, and good for Chip Ganassi, good for Scott Dixon. Overall, a good day for Joseph Newgarden and Scott McLaughlin. McLaughlin was a little bit disappointed when I talked to him post-race about the finish.
He should be.
Yeah.
He had that race. He had that race in control. They made the wrong strategy call, though.
Yep.
They started on the black tires, which was the mistake.
Yeah.
And to your point, you talked about it with Devlin. The real strategy is when you have a really highly degrading tire, whether it's the black or the green or the red or whatever we're calling the tires these days. Whichever tire is degrading the most, typically you want to start on that, specifically at a street course, because the way IndyCar street courses seem to operate these days is you have that crash at the start. Everybody's able to dumpster dive, get off of the non-preferred tire and get onto the preferred tire. And then it's a lot, unfortunately, it's a lot of saving, whether that's fuel, whether that's tires, because you had the guys on the greens who had to try to make them last as long as they could, and obviously they couldn't. I think you mentioned at times during the weekend they were good for one lap, which isn't enough. I think you want to maybe have that tire last 3/4 of a fuel run, not 1/4 of a fuel run, and that's what we were seeing.
I think that's the most drivers I've seen hit pit road after one lap in a very long time. And I tweeted about it. I thought it was going to be in the first 3 laps. So from the start of the race, we were obviously in the pit area. Then we came down. There was a fence in one. And I had a friend that met me there that she really didn't know a lot about racing. And I said, well, as soon as they go by us, they're going to wreck. And so we could see like the bridge that they went under. And then we turned to the video board, and as soon as we turned, they were wrecking. And I said, yep. I said, and Eric Smith was standing there with us, and he's like, I'm going to go talk to A-Rod. And I said, well, you better cover pit road, too, because it's about to get real busy. Kyle Kirkwood finishing 5th. He's going to Chili's like us, like we did last night. Marcus Ericsson, I thought, had another.
Before.
Do I?
And the day before.
Oh, there you go.
We closed the Chili's down yesterday.
Marcus Ericsson was Mr. Consistent. He led one of the practices. He finished every session this weekend in the top 7, and he told me after the race, the consistency that I'm looking for when you're putting yourself in those positions to be in the top 5, top 6, you're going to have the days where you have the chance to win. And then, again, I know you want to mention is somebody who I spent a lot of the weekend following, talking to, ended up with a top 10 finish. The second most impressive run by a VK this weekend was Arenas finishing 9th, which was impressive, very impressive. And I asked him, if I would have told you that Thursday, would you take the weekend? He goes, absolutely. I'm ecstatic about it. But, of course, his wife, Carmen, who him and I talked about a little bit, was in her second professional boxing match on Saturday and kicked the blank out of her opponent and knocked her out in 19 seconds.
I would not mess with Carmen VK. You couldn't pay me enough money to look at her wrong.
I'll tell you
She's
off
a badass.
I'll tell you off the air what I really said to Renus, but yeah, it was very impressive run for Renus VK.
No, 1,000%, and that's something that I said in our preview last week. Is that I think that Renus VK is going to have a great season, and it's a great place for that relationship with him and Dale Coyne Racing to start. A lot of people forget this, but Renus, one of his best tracks is St. Petersburg. He always starts out the season very strongly. Ditto for Dale Coyne Racing. Yep. I think that the two organizations, Renus and Dale Coyne Racing, are probably a little bit surprised with it resulting in a top 10. But I think if you look historically, it makes a ton of sense. And I think it's going to continue because one of the things that we've noticed about Dale Coyne Racing over the past, ever since the Aeroscreen era, there's always at least one real strong car that comes out of that stable. And when Renus went over there, I said, you know what? He's motivated. I think Dale Coyne's motivated to show themselves, and I think it's going to work. And I think that's going to continue to build and grow through the season, and this might be the start of a beautiful relationship. You mentioned that first lap crash.
Yes.
That was the culmination of the no-good, very bad weekend for Will Power. I know we talked about Will Power a little bit. He had to replace 2 MGUKs, I believe. That's the hybrid system for those of you who don't speak tech.
Yeah, Machine Gun Kelly, what? No.
Not the Machine Gun Kelly. But that crash at the beginning, that's not a good start for Will Power in terms of the championship. And it's very rare that you see any driver yapping at Will Power and Will Power not responding, but Nolan Siegel was giving him an earful after that crash because Nolan Siegel had a really good weekend going.
He did.
And he was kind of showing us what we asked him to do, right? It was with Nolan Siegel, the question mark going into the season was, listen, man, you got this ride. All these people have put faith in you. It's time to go. And he was going. It's just, unfortunately, Will Power decided to go a little too fast.
Yeah, and it was a disappointing debut, I think, for Louis Foster. I was impressed with Christian Lundgaard. You and I were high on him last week when we talked about what he can do.
He's going to win 2 races
this week, what he can do this year, and he led a lot of laps. Obviously, strategy had a lot to do with that, but I thought it was an overall good weekend for Christian Lundgaard. And in his debut with Arrow McLaren, I know Rossi ended up with the top 10 as well in his debut with Ed Carpenter Racing. I think that's 3 straight top 10s for Rossi at St. Petersburg. So yeah, there was some drive. And Pato, again, as we mentioned, had an up and down day.
Great. Hold on a second. Here's the thing about Pato, and this was very similar to his run at the 2024 Indy 500. He was nowhere. Admitted he was nowhere. Had a terrible race. Had a flat tire at one point. Was completely off on the strategy. They were just completely out to lunch. Somehow, some way, at the end of that race, he finished 11th.
Yeah. No,
what?
Super impressive kind of bounce back. And, which, as we learned with Colton Herta, those type of things can really go in your way and have one of those, like we got really lucky and we turn it into a result, or it can go south as it did for Colton Herta. I think another storyline going in that we were looking for was what was Prema going to do in their debut. And I talked to some people inside of that team the night before, Thursday, and they said, look, there's a lot of things we haven't done. We haven't plugged in a fuel hose on a pit road during a practice, during a race, those type of things. I know that they had issues with their radios throughout the weekend. I think the 83 was parked for a lot of that practice, dealing with the radio issues, and the spotter that was down at the end of turn 1. They tried to get him to run the radio back, and they just didn't have enough time. Overall, I thought Colin Milot was very impressive, and I thought Robert Schwartzman had an overall okay weekend. There's always, just like in the Fox broadcast, your first time out, you're always going to have some hiccups, some wrinkles that you're going to need to iron out. If the worst thing that we're saying about Prema's opening weekend inside of IndyCar is they had some radio issues. I talked to Schwartzman afterwards. He said he likes a lot about IndyCar. He told me flat out and very honest. It was the first time I've talked to him. Very honest. He said, I'm confused sometimes on what the tires do and what don't do and what you have to do with all that. He mentioned that there were drivers out there that had gotten into his way, which was interesting. And I said, how do you approach the next race? Because you're going to all these tracks for the first time and you're learning. Is it tape? Is it film? And he's like, I'll watch some film of other races, but it's just kind of learning on the fly. So I thought overall Prema had a pretty solid opening weekend to their IndyCar campaign.
Robert Schwartzman impressed the hell out of me this weekend, actually. So we think about Callum Ilott. He qualified last, which I think was a bit of a surprise, to be honest with you. And Schwartzman out-qualified him and out-raced him. Yeah. And I don't think that should go under the radar, and I think it is a little bit. With a new driver, new team, a driver who's not comfortable in IndyCar yet, to show a pretty decent result. I mean, again, it's not going to make headlines. You never saw him on Fox, but I think Robert Schwartzman did have a very, very solid opening race. Now something that's interesting, Tony, and I suppose we'll talk about this because I think it was the most impressive drive of the day, was Scott Dixon.
Of course.
Calling his own strategy, not having a radio. Yeah, I know where you're going. Yeah, hold on, let me cook.
Okay.
Let me cook. Didn't have a radio. Couldn't communicate with anybody. Didn't have a spotter. Called his own strategy.
Yes.
Had he had literally anyone telling him when to pit, he could have undercut Palou and Joseph and would have won the race. Why was Robert Schwartzman parked during practice for not having a radio, and yet Scott Dixon can run 100 laps at St. Pete without a radio? That is a question mark that I have, and I would like an answer on that one.
Well, obviously because Dixon's the GOAT of our generation.
Well, I know he can handle it.
Yeah.
Because
and it's a great question, though.
Yeah.
Like, what is, and I will certainly, and I should have already done that, I can certainly check in and figure out why that was allowed. It was funny because we were standing there in Dixon's pit, and Emma walked up to me and was like, he should have pitted 3 laps earlier, and he would have won the race. That's why he doesn't look happy, because he didn't have a radio, and he would have, like you said, it was 3 laps. He would have pitted 3 laps earlier had he had a radio. What's the rule? Can we send somebody out there with a sign again to like hold up? And what's the rule on that? Because Scott Dixon could have very easily won this race on Sunday had he known to pit 3 laps early. Luckily, he's been around in the sport. He is the king of fuel mileage and when to pit, when to not to pit. So in his brain, that dude probably is doing a math equation while cruising down an airport runway at 145 miles an hour. So that was certainly the most impressive drive. And I spent some time with Scott after the race on Sunday, and it was like, that's like a championship type of run when we look back. But he was disappointed that he didn't win the race, which is very Scott Dixon fashion. So certainly one of the best drives we saw of the weekend.
You mentioned Andretti. We didn't see them once on the broadcast outside of Colton, but both Kirkwood and Ericsson, to your point, had a great race, I think. Not a great race, but like they didn't have any mistakes, which I think especially Ericsson struggled with last year. So it was good to see him bounce back. He had a mechanical failure last year at St. Pete, so that really wasn't his fault. But I think that was a solid start for that team. To kind of go back to the championship contenders, I think that's an important. Obviously, Scott Dixon's going to be there. Will Power had a terrible race.
Let me stop you there real quick. I just want to make one point about Marcus Ericsson's team. I was in his pit during practice, and there was, and you talk about no mistakes. There are so many new crewmen on that team that there was a list on the pit box of everybody's name and what they do. So, that's, you talk about attention to detail and making sure there are no mistakes and making sure everybody's in the right spots. I think that was very impressive. And Marcus didn't, was inside the top 7 all weekend long. And I think, with him working with the mental coach over the offseason and being better with the team, his second season with said team, Kyle talked about that last week, was going to be a big factor. And I thought that was very impressive.
That's something that Marcus, by the way, has done for several seasons, has been working with a mental coach. He's always thought it's very important to be mentally fit as well as physically fit. That's something I've always been impressed with how Marcus Ericsson approaches racing. Championship contenders. Will Power, bad day. Scott Dixon, Terminator-style day. Joseph Newgarden, great race. I would say from Joseph, they didn't manage to fuel quite right. The Chevy, as we kind of alluded to in the last show, has a little more horsepower, but of course when you have a little more horsepower, you don't have as much fuel. You're not as fuel efficient when you have more horsepower. And he ran out of fuel on the last lap, last second place to Scott Dixon.
Yes.
I mentioned this, and actually Tim Cindric, I don't remember what article it was. I'll have to cite it, but Tim Cindric
he was
actually
there, by
said,
the way. I saw him.
Good.
Saw him and John Menard.
Wow, incredible.
Crazy.
Tim Cindric said what I said, and some people had some disagreement with me about that, but he said Newgarden's focus this year should be the championship, not the Indianapolis 500. So sometimes, folks, I know what I'm talking about. The big thing with Joseph, I think, great start for the championship run. I still feel that Scott McLaughlin will likely win the championship on the whole, especially once we get to the ovals. I think that's where he's going to really start to shine. Some other tracks that he's very good at, like Barber, he's going to have a good opportunity to gain points. But you've kind of brought up him a couple of times. Alex Palou. Mm-hmm. The last time he won a championship in like super-duper convincing fashion, it was 2021, where he won the first race of the season. That time it was at Barber. We could be in a situation where Alex Palou is going to win the championship in a convincing fashion. Do you think that's where we're headed, or can any one of those other drivers I mentioned stop him?
First of all, I want to mention Will Power, and it seems like to win a championship, you have to be very consistent. But you are gifted, granted, however you want to say it, maybe one for sure, 2 maybe races where Palou obviously last year had Milwaukee, even though he was well out ahead in the championship. Dixon last year, you remember what could have been if he would have started the Mid-Ohio race. McLaughlin would have been your champion probably last year if he didn't have all of his points taken away at St. Pete because of the push-to-pass issue. I'm going to say this, and look, we're talking about Alex Palou, who's on one of the best runs that we've really ever seen. I still think, if you want to talk about Achilles' heel, even though he does have a runner-up finish at the Indianapolis 500, we talked about this. Colton and McLaughlin last year won their first oval races. They finally took that hump. And what did McLaughlin say after he won his first races? I'm an IndyCar driver now. And I still think that what could bring the field or first from first, if Palou's leading when we get to Indy, what could bring those top 3, top 5 of the championship closer would be the ovals. Now, we've obviously learned 3 times, possibly a 4th this year, that you don't have to win an oval to win a championship, but I do think those oval races, we could see the likes of Joseph, who always dominates at least one oval race a year, obviously has dominated several. We could see Colton, who now has that one under his belt, McLaughlin, Power, who has oval wins, kind of keep that a little bit closer and keep a leash on Palou from running away with it.
Can you guys tell that Tony really likes ovals?
I
love ovals.
Well, I mean,
Need more of them,
I think we're both. I think
we need
both
more
love
ovals.
I mean, so I do want to make a point of contention here, because you said Palou's Achilles heel is the Indianapolis 500.
No, I said it was ovals in general.
Okay. But the Indianapolis 500 is the first oval. It is the most important oval of the season. It's the one that you can gain the most points on, too. While it's not double points anymore, you still have the qualifications, which Alex Palou is multiple-time pole sitter at the Indianapolis 500. So Palou, outside of one blemish in 2020 where he crashed the car, 2021 could have and should have won the race. 2022 could have and should have won the race. 2023 could have and should have won the race. 2024 is the only blemish on that record, and that's because he was using a backup engine, and the Hondas had a bit of a step back to the Penske Chevys of last year. So,
you asked what would keep him, and I gave you something.
No, I agree. I asked the question, and the answer, I was looking for. I don't know if we could have a different answer, but if that's the answer, I think Palou is just, he's a couple of whispers. He's a couple
It's bad luck. It's bad luck at Indy. And
100%.
he's had that. He's been taken out on pit road. There's been things that are out of his that he didn't do wrong. Like there, obviously, when Renus collides with you and you got the best car, I mean, it just seems like Alex Palou kind of has that Scott Dixon luck at the Indianapolis 500. Yes, Dixon has a win in 2008, but what have we talked about with Dixon is how many their 500s are getting away from both Palou and Dixon. So if I had to come up with something, can he consistently be on the podium in oval races?
Well, I know what they need to do. I've got the solution to Alex Palou's woes at the Indy 500. Ganassi has won the Indy 500. Well, so I don't know if we consider, we are actually in the race shop where the 89 winner came out of. I don't know if you consider that a Ganassi win or not. Let's say the Ganassi wins are 2000, 2008, 2010, 2012, and 2022. What do we have in common with all of those race cars? They are painted red. Hey, DHL, here's an idea. For the Indy 500, paint the car red. And Alex Palou, or hey, PNC could do this too. Paint them all red, and all of a sudden, I bet you Scott Dixon and Alex Palou go 1-2 and they lap the field. That's just my theory.
Red with the rainbow DHL logo, and everybody will be happy.
Well, then it wouldn't be red anymore.
It's got to all be red, and the DHL logo can be in rainbow.
How about a rainbow lightning bolt?
You could do that.
That's my suggestion.
Very Mario Kart-ish, wouldn't it?
The kids love Mario Kart.
All the kids.
It would be awesome.
They love Legos. They love shirts inside a Hollister.
Somebody out there with the Forza iRacing designers, can you make me a red DHL car with a rainbow lightning bolt on it? I think it would look really good.
Look, we're nitpicking one of the best drivers we've ever seen. So Alex Palou, we do like you, but I
love Alex.
We love
what
Alex.
Are we talking about?
But the question was what's going to keep Palou from running away.
Yeah.
And so we shall see it. And I think, going into the month of May of the Indianapolis 500, if you realistically ask me right now how many drivers could realistically win the 500, I think you're at 11 and 12. And I don't think you can say that at every other race.
I hear that a lot. And
I hear like 14, 15, half the field. I think that's a little bit too much.
I think 11 or 12 is too much. Here's the funny thing.
Let me preface.
Yeah,
I think it's 11 and 12 right now. But on Sunday night after pole day, I can get it down to 7.
Yeah. I think
because it just depends, right? So if you're 14th and a cloud comes over and somebody qualifies 8th, okay, do they have a better chance than the driver who might be fastest but went out when the temperature was 10 degrees? But I think usually it's the Penske's, it's 2 Ganassis.
That's still too many. I think it comes down. The Indy 500.
You think that there's less than 5 people that have a chance to win this
No,
year's
I think
500?
the exact number every year for the 500 is about 5. You have the 3 fastest cars in the field, and then you have 2 dark horses. And, you may have different people run at the front. You might have fuel mileage and all that stuff. But really, the Indy 500, at its core, is the same race it's been since 1911. And the Indy 500, more often than not, you might have, a 2013 race where half the field leads. But how many of those were quality passes? How much of that time was quality time in the lead? When it comes down to when the quality time matters, you ain't going to see the car that qualified 15th and ran, 8th most of the race up at the front of the field. You're going to see the 5 guys who really have a shot to win that race at the front. Or maybe it'll be 3 or 4 because a couple of them will get taken out throughout the race. That's just how the Indianapolis 500. This, I get it's marketing, and I appreciate that we're saying, oh, look how competitive it is. It's competitive, yeah, sure, but I don't think it's quite that competitive. It ain't Daytona.
Well, and I mentioned this too. Like last year was the first time sitting for somebody who sits in turn 3. We've seen a legit pass for the lead, not just. I mean,
what, the 2023 Indy 500 wasn't legitimate to you? What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
That wasn't in turn 3. That was he had already made the pass when he was coming into my view.
Oh, that's fair. Okay.
No, I think it's 7 or 8. I think it's the 3 Penske's. You can't.
Will Power was out to lunch last year. He wasn't a factor.
He was second until he wrecked out.
He wasn't running second when he crashed.
Was he not running second?
He was back in the field.
Because Colton
he fell back.
He was.
Colton was the one.
Colton
that
was
going to win
second
the
and
race
wrecked out.
Didn't wreck.
Power wasn't second when he wrecked out.
No, he was way back there.
Oh, I thought he was.
He dropped like a rock as soon as the green flag.
But on race day morning, you would not have said that he's not a factor. He wasn't going to be a factor.
Stephen Wilson said on my channel he was going to burn the tires off his car, and he did. Shout out Steph. You knew what you were talking about.
There you go. I think on race day it's realistically 7 to 8 that could win.
I mean, I think probably fair. But I would.
You're not going to count out Pato, so there's 6 right there.
So who are you counting? You're going McLaughlin. You're going Joseph. You're going Dixon, Pillow, Herta.
I'm going Power as well. You don't think Power has a chance to win the Indianapolis 500 strapped into a Penske car?
Right this second?
Yeah, strapped into a Penske car.
Well, I mean, right this second, sure, anybody has a chance in a Penske car. But we'll have to see how the month goes. But typically in the race, Will Power in recent years hasn't been a factor for the 500.
Well,
just
who has? 4 people?
You just made my point.
No, but I'm
saying
you
just made my point.
But it's been okay. So this is like we can do this all night.
Yeah, we can do this all night.
We're about to do the Indy 500 of going in circles in this conversation.
I think all 3 Penske's. It's hard for me to say that. Oh well, no, there's no way. I mean,
so
okay,
then
fine.
Do you count the 2 Foyt cars then too?
No, I don't. Well,
Santino
was up there.
Right. I'm cutting you guys off.
That's fine.
I let you guys go for.
I think
a
it's
little too
crazy
long
to say that Will Power is not in contention.
He's kicking us out of the chat.
I would take him over McLaughlin.
I was letting you guys go there because I was entertained, but
I would take Power with a better chance over McLaughlin, but we'll get into that somewhere else.
I was entertained. Hope everyone else was entertained, but we're gonna do this at least 10 more times until May.
Oh yeah.
So to the chat, right? So
hello chat.
Let's spend the last 8 minutes here just answering questions from the chat. So if you guys want to ask questions, do so now. There was one earlier that I want to get to. Mainly because he asked me a question. KP Digital from Vietnam, by the way.
Oh yeah, shout out.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Got him some Nashville tickets last year.
All right.
Awesome.
Great guy.
Asked me what I thought about Graham's race, because obviously last week I made the Graham joke. I thought it was good, but really what I wanted to bring that up for is, number one, I don't think you guys mentioned Rossi in his awesome top 10.
I did. I mentioned that he's got 3 straight top 10s at St. Pete.
I think my honorable dark horse on the weekend that I was like, that didn't get the result he deserved was Devlin DiFrancesco.
Yeah. That's a great call.
Qualified 14th, had a great weekend, and was in for a top 10, and then apparently during the race had a slow leak or something in the tire. But he legitimately had a top 10, and enough to the point where I think my actual big pick for the year is that Devlin's going to continue to have a great year. I think honestly he's a top 10, top 15 driver the whole year.
And
top 10?
This is the driver who missed last year. Mm-hmm. You and I talked about in the preview last year. We knew he was going to be good at Toronto. We knew he was going to be good or will be good at the Indy GP. And Toronto, and street courses, right? So those results at St. Pete and Graham, I think, where did Graham end up? 12th?
Yeah, 12th. It wasn't bad.
Thought that was a pretty good start. I didn't really talk to Graham, but I spent some time with Devlin. And we talked about the strategy. I wish I had the picture. I was standing there, and then Devlin was like right here, but he was standing on the wall, and I was like still up to his shoulder. And I go, "This is the only time you're ever going to be looking down at me, so you know how I feel when I'm interviewing you." And it was a good laugh. I like Devlin. I've talked to multiple people inside of Ray Hall of how much of a joy he is to have around. Devlin told me how great of a fit it is with Ray Hall, and to be a part of that and to help Louis and to bring something with Graham. I don't know if I'm going to say he's going to finish top 10 in the points, but I'm with you, Kyle. I think we're going to talk about some really good, consistent runs this year by Devlin DeFrancesco.
Ray Hall might have taken a step this year. I'm curious because based on the practice and qualifying, I think Foster was actually the fastest of the three.
Yes.
Taken out in the first corner, we'll never know what he would have done. I think Foster's going to be kind of the barometer, believe it or not, for that team. And if Graham and Devlin were kind of performing above where they were last year, that probably says Foster's going to do that too. I'm curious. I think if they did take a step, we're really going to see it on like the natural terrain road courses and especially the ovals, because the street courses, to your point, have been one of the strong suits of Ray Hall. Obviously, they have their win in the last 5 years with Lundgaard at Toronto. And, of course, the Indy GP, for whatever reason, they have that place figured out. So, yeah, I think Ray Hall is going to be something to watch as the season progresses as a team. Can they take a step up? And, again, kind of circle back to the Indianapolis 500, bringing Sato in for a second year should help them with that entire program.
Well, and getting all four cars in, I think, obviously, and
big goal.
And I think they would tell you, we don't want to be even near that back row shootout. We want to be safely into the field when we get to the gun on that back row shootout for the Indianapolis 500. Kyle, what else we got?
Sean Dunham asks,
Shawnee D mode. It's my boy.
Expectations for Katherine Legge in Phoenix.
Oh, yeah, the NASCAR race. We
Yes.
finally get to talk about NASCAR, chat. Sorry about last week.
Yeah, so Christopher Bell gets it done again. Good for him.
That was a good race.
I like to see Bell. Look, I mean, it's cool. Katherine's going to be the first female driver in, 7 years since Danica ran.
Yep. At least in the Cup Series, yeah.
You guys will know this more. I don't think BJ McLeod is at the team or doesn't. What's the team?
It's a 78 car.
So, I mean, I don't know where that car is, but
not good.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've said this about many drivers in the past. Finish laps, just, don't get anybody else's way. Learn and finish laps. I think that's the best that you can do if you're Katherine Legge.
I think I'm kind of curious about Katherine Legge. I know we've speculated a little bit about her. I wonder what the goal is here. Could there be a double coming? I don't know. I think it would be kind of
Where'd you hear that from?
I didn't hear it anywhere. I'm just kind of making an educated guess. Educated guess.
Don't lie to him, David.
Educated.
You're
just gonna let
that has been brought up. That has been brought up as a possible goal. I don't know what that would look like, and I don't know if it.
She got to get in the Indy 500 first.
Well, you got to. I'm assuming you have to get in the Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola 600 would almost certainly, because they're not going to have 40 cars or over 40 cars at the Coca-Cola.
And she's in this weekend, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so NASCAR typically doesn't have more than 40 for a non-Daytona 500 race anymore.
Okay, so
typically doesn't. But you never know.
Yeah, the double I thought was a little bit crazy when I was told that was a goal. I'm not saying it's happening this year. I'm not saying it's going to be achieved.
It would be cool. It would be
very cool. Maybe her and Larson can share a plane back over.
It would be the KL double, 2 KLs doing the double.
There you go.
The chat, what are we doing? Why do we keep coming up with all this stuff? We're giving away too much for free here.
Yeah. My goodness, we should be in the we should help them with marketing. We should be in the booth for the Indy Next races.
That would be cool, wouldn't it?
Heard that was something that was talked about, but
you know what? We should do a Manning cast, right? Like, I think that would be cool. I mean, you talk about influencers, but there's a difference, I think, between influencers and people with influence. And I think we need to draw a line
or in
there.
the know, which is a whole other
Kyle,
story.
save us. Get us off the air.
But no, hold on. Yes, we should. Can they simulcast us on FS2 for the
FS2?
Well, if it's a Manning cast and the next race is on FS1, where would they put us? They can put us on FS2.
I'm Big Fox, baby.
Yeah,
Big Fox.
They're not putting
Big Fox. It's going to be at 9 in the morning anyway. What are they showing? The Bill Nye the Science Guy?
All right.
Come on.
I'm going to make this the last question. This is we got a big question. Going to take a total hook from where we've been going, from where the conversation's been. This is an interesting question. Voltage asks, how big would IndyCar be in 2025, or small, if Randy Bernard was still promoting the sport?
Oh, boy, you're going to get two different answers here, I think.
It's going to be
Go ahead,
last
David.
question. So
Take it home, David.
So, still promoting the sport?
Yep.
Hold on. It was nice to see Susie Weldon over the weekend. I taught her how to wave the green flag. She went up over the shoulder. Go ahead, David. The floor is yours.
That's dirty. You can't do that.
Tough.
That's a dirty thing to say. So you definitely don't want. I learned a new phrase when Jay Fry got fired, which is comp and ops, competition and operations.
I got it.
So you probably don't want Randy Bernard in comp and ops. You want someone like a Jay Fry to be kind of in charge of that. But I think from a promotional standpoint, I think Randy really had IndyCar going in the right direction. I think that he was willing to spearhead some things that IndyCar needed to do. He's the last person to execute a new car. Sorry, I'll put some, I got this far without bringing that up, so I'll put it in the swear jar. I think that Randy had some good ideas. I think he needed someone. The biggest problem that Randy had was he didn't have someone who was a racing first person to kind of temper some of the grandiose ideas and say, here's how we can do this realistically. Because I think he was an out-of-the-box thinker, and I think that's what IndyCar needs. So I think it's so hard to say because it was so long ago, but I would like to think that he would have at least maybe taken some more risks over the last few years. But obviously the risks, some people have opinions about risks that are going to be, I think, said here in just a second.
That's an interesting debate right there. There were things that Randy did. He brought in Izod, and there was a lot of, or he was a part of that, and there was a lot of good things, I thought, with Izod. I mean, it wasn't an apparel company or whatever you want to call it that I maybe knew about or wore, but it was something I could go buy at a Macy's and I could buy Indy 500 shirts, that type of thing. I do think he was an outside-the-box thinker. I do think there were some things that probably shouldn't have happened. And at the end of the day, I think Randy did a lot of good, did a lot of bad. But I'm safe to say that I'm okay with where we are with Mr. Doug Bowles, who I think could be that outside-the-box thinker.
Doug's been in the job for a week. What are you talking about?
But you talk about an outside-the-box thinker. I think Doug Bowles can 100% be an outside-the-box thinker.
I trust Doug, too. I do. And he's got the racing background. So he's got the promotional eye and the racing background. I think to go back to what we were talking about like 2 weeks ago, I think it's up to Roger Penske, Mark Miles, and Bud Denker to let him off the leash a little bit. I hope they do.
What Doug does that I appreciate that Randy Bernard did was, like, I told David about this. I went back in time on the IndyCar YouTube channel, which I fully... I would say everyone should do that if you're a big IndyCar fan. Like, just go to IndyCar's
They're going to make everything
They've been
private
doing a lot
now
better.
that you did that.
Their YouTube channel's
but,
great.
like, it's awesome. But, like, Randy, like, first day of president, put out a video. And this is back when, like, before social media. Put out a video, like, here's who I am, here's what we're going to do. Like, immediately, video to the people. And he did that, like, almost monthly, where he'd do, like, a State of the Union address to the people, to the fans. And that was something I feel like we've been missing for the last 10 or so years since, where it's like, nobody's talking. Where I feel like Doug will give that. Like,
Doug. Well, I mean, Doug was opening up cards last week. Doug's out there. Doug's will do things.
Doug brought that up specifically as a point on Connor's show, that he was going to be more, or wanted to be more open about things and try to calm the fan base down a little bit, because I think that's one of the big things I brought up a couple of years ago when IndyCar was really going, one of the many times IndyCar was going through it in December, was the more you communicate, just let us know where you're going. Yeah. Let us know where that ship is headed. It's ultimately up to us whether we jump on the ship or not.
Yeah, but they've done a lot of writing checks that they haven't cashed over the last couple of years.
Well, that's the big problem. But again, it's because they're talking big, but they're not talking substance. I think there's a big difference.
Be realistic.
Yes, be realistic. I think stop talking about international series and just maybe try to get Mexico going, right? I think that's a fair compromise.
Yeah. And to that point too, okay, what have we learned over the last couple of weeks? Okay, new cars coming, but then it was 2027. Now it's 2028.
No, they didn't commit to that.
Okay.
He said, well, it might be 2027. It might be 2028.
So we don't know.
So we can't even get a commitment on a delay, which is something. You're really winding me up. Stop it.
Yeah, well,
I think it's a good time to
wrap it up.
We went a little long in this one again, but then again, we did have a red flag.
Yeah, we had a red flag for like 10 minutes there.
Yeah.
Look, it happens. Look, technical things happen. It's obviously not something that we were like approaching that was going to happen. So thanks for sticking with us. Like and subscribe here on YouTube. Also check us out on our Instagram account. We got so much to do. You can check out our shirts. We got some, and there's more. I've seen them.
They are
There's some really good
awesome.
ones coming, and I think that we're going to have a little bit more of a role here with the shop over the next couple of weeks as we head into the month of May. So you can use our promo code UNVERIFIED15 to get you 15% off of these cool shirts, as you can see. So we appreciate their support. We've got a lot of big news that I'm sitting on that you guys know some about, and we're looking forward to being here every Tuesday with you here on Unverified, David.
Yeah, I think it was a really good show. We appreciate all the support. We've been seeing it. You heard it in St. Pete, which I think
Yeah,
was
we had
really
a lot.
cool.
I had a lot of good feedback. A lot of people coming up saying, hey, love the show. Shout out to Miles Rowe's dad, who thought Indy Nate was me, and was telling him how much he loved the show. And then I was walking to dinner, and I said, "Excuse me, sir, I heard that you thought that you were talking." And he goes, "Oh man, I know." He goes, "I watched the show. I loved it, but I just got you guys confused." I said, "Look, I look different when I do my hair than when I'm wearing a hat. I get that all the time. It's all good."
The Rowe family is awesome.
Love them.
We're big fans of them. We're looking forward to hopefully seeing Miles in an IndyCar at some
We
point.
will.
Maybe this fall at some point. We'll see. Great show. Appreciate Kyle. Appreciate Tony, and we appreciate the audience. We're still simulcasting this on the David Land channel, so we appreciate everybody who's tuning in there. Subscribe to the Unverified channel. Link is in the description. Eventually, we're going to be exclusive there, but at least for a little while, we're going to continue to simulcast this because we kind of like the direction that this show is going. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Next Tuesday, 8 o'clock sharp p.m. Eastern Time, we'll be here to talk through some things. I'll be flying to Sebring next week, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And, of course, I'm sure there'll be much more news throughout the week. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to Unverified. We'll see you all next week.